This is my Pi project video submission for my CNIT 176 Raspberry Pi project. For my Raspberry Pi project, I was making both a web server and web page on the Pi, as well as giving it RAID storage. I did this for multiple reasons. One, I thought it was something that I was able to actually do. I didn't think it would be beyond my abilities in the class. And I also thought it might be one of the more helpful options of what I could do for the future. I thought the web page would allow me to have a wide range of things I would be able to do, because I thought that I could always come back and edit the page to make it into whatever I needed to do, especially for other class projects I may have in which I might be making a web page or trying to make a solution to some sort of problem where a web page holding all sorts of information might be a valid option for that. And then I thought the RAID storage would be helpful because if I did want to expand my capabilities and see what else I could do with the Pi in the future, it might be helpful to have more storage or differently segmented storage in order to make those projects run more efficiently and just let me do more bigger projects onto the Pi once this class is concluded. For the actual different architectures and hardware that were involved in the project, I was using a Raspberry Pi 5 with 8 gigabytes of RAM. And first and foremost, the project obviously very heavily relies on the CPU hardware, because everything that's being done on the Pi is going to rely on the calculations and work done by the CPU. For the web page, especially if it's going to be theoretically receiving different web requests, the CPU is going to need to be able to handle those requests and then send back the proper responses and web page answers that the requests want by accessing the files that are stored on the Pi. And then for this RAID storage, it's going to involve making sure that any sorts of file requests that are on those drives are going to be able to be, gotten from memory and then read and used to however they need to be used. The Pi project also very heavily relied on using the Linux OS commands and systems, because for the web page it involved using commands to install multiple different files and software systems in order to get the web page to run. And then also for the RAID storage, it involved using a variety of commands to be able to partition the space and create a RAID volume that could be mounted into the files. It very heavily relied on the storage and file architecture, more heavily so for the RAID storage, obviously, because it had to be mounted to the rest of the file storage, because the OS and everything else was on a 32 gigabyte microSD. And then the web page also, its files a folder had to be created, and those files had to sit and be able to be accessed properly by the system. It also used the USB connections and all the hardware that interfaces with those, because the RAID storage relied on the use of 2 external drives that were plugged into the Pi. And then it all heavily relies on networking, especially with the web page, because any sorts of requests that would come through the web page would have to go over the connection and then be received by the Pi over the internet and then be processed. Everything happens with the web page, and then everything gets sent back. So moving on to the actual procedures, the project was split up into 2 phases, with each one being about 2 weeks of the project. So the first section was the web server, the second was the RAID storage. For the web server, first commands had to be used to install Apache 2 and configure that system. Then PHP had to be installed because a lot of the web page files were .php files. And then MariaDB had to be installed. And then the most important thing was installing and configuring WordPress, because WordPress was the actual system the web page worked through. So once WordPress was installed, I could go on and type localhost into the browser of the Pi, and that would redirect me to a page that allowed me to set up the actual web page. So what that involved was creating a username and creating a password for the page that essentially allowed me access into the back end where I could change and customize the page. Once that was set up and I had just the base configuration settings in, then I was actually able to use that login I had previously set up, and I was able to access the backend where there were many different options about how the site could be accessed, and things like the actual layout where you could choose from a few different templates that were already just there with WordPress. And then you could also go into the actual page and edit all and add all these text boxes and paragraphs and anything a web page might need to be a web page. Then the second phase, which was the RAID storage, it first involved getting two USBs. I used two 32 gigabyte USBs for this. And then each had to be configured separately to begin. So that involved using a command to put in how I wanted the drives to be configured, to get them to actually go along with RAID storage and those procedures and specifications, and then actually partitioning them. And then once all the commands were used to say what those configurations were, all you had to do was just type W in at the end, and then that actually wrote all the commands to the drives and finalized those changes. Once they were configured to be used for RAID storage, then the actual RAID controller software had to be installed, which was done in a very similar manner to the Apache, PHP, MariaDB, and WordPress, which was just installing it from the web using an internet connection. And then once the RAID controller was in, I was actually able to go in and create a volume and specify that those two drives were what were going to be used for the volume and just call it RAID 0. And then the actual volume could be mounted within the file system, so it had a place to be. So the results for this were shown with a few of these screenshots, which aren't super high quality because they were just taken on the Pi using the Grim command. For the web page, I was able to access that back page for customization and design, like I said, and then by going into the browser, you could type in localhost into the browser, and it would redirect you into the page, where you could then see whatever you wanted to change. I didn't actually do anything with the design. I was more just proving that I could get a web page up and be able to access it. So that is shown mostly through this bottom left screenshot, where there's the different files for the web page, which were stored in var, www, html, where there's all the different PHP configuration settings that made the web page work. For the RAID storage, there's these two screenshots, which were mounted at var www./html, where the web pages files were. And then if you went into the file system, there was mount/RAID 0. And then through this screenshot, which is quite blurry because the pipe's not super high quality, using the lsblk command, you can actually see all the devices that are attached to the Pi, where the removable drives were named SDA1 and SDB1, where both are labeled as being a part of RAID 0, and then you can actually see it will say it's mounted at var/www/html. For troubleshooting, there were quite a number of problems that ended coming up. I had a few problems where the Pi kept shutting off when I was having the mouse and keyboard and everything plugged in because it said it wasn't getting enough power. So I believe I just changed where the power cord I was using was plugged into. I think it was originally just plugged into the computer, but I instead just put it onto a separate block that was into a power strip, and that ended up fixing the problem. It didn't shut off again after that. When setting up the WordPress files, there were a few typos in the PHP files where I believe you had to do a greater than symbol $PHP less than symbol or something like that. And I believe I ended up not having the question marks or something. Just something small that meant the changes I was making to that file weren't actually being reflected on the on the web page, because that was before WordPress had been installed, and so at that point I was just typing in text into that file, which was then reflected on the page. I also actually, after coming back after doing the RAID storage, when I wanted to test the web page, I had some problems actually accessing it after I had done the RAID storage, where it was giving me an error 500 and it wasn't showing up when I did localhost. I think it's possible, I'm not really sure what caused this. I think it's possible that when I made the RAID volume, because I mounted it onto var www www.html. I think that might have caused some problems in accessing the PHP files. Um, and then also, I think maybe it's possible that WordPress or one of the other software systems might have just needed an update or something that meant the web page wasn't actually working correctly. I mean, so from this, I would think that it might be better to first, in the future, do the RAID volume first, and then install the web page and all of it onto the volume, rather than trying to mess around with mounting the RAID volume after the web page files are already in and settled. I also think I had a slight problem with moving the Pi when I took the USBs out, where when I put them back in a few times, it was giving me problems with the OS being locked. I'm not sure if that was related, but I would probably just keep the USBs in the Pi in the future so it doesn't cause any problems by removing one and not the other or something. And then I think in the future, I would definitely want to mess around more with the different web page settings and see what could be done with that, as well as customizing it into something that I can actually use and apply to future projects. And so that's pretty much the end of my presentation on my Pi project. It didn't end up working completely with the web page not ending up being shown after the RAID storage. But all in all, every step kind of went pretty smoothly for the most part, besides the few troubleshooting steps I mentioned, and it all ended up getting solved in the end.